All right, so let's start here. Cape Town's fires, it seems, have flared up again. They were contained briefly earlier today, but the winds are still high. Firefighters are trying their best to extinguish a handful of hotspots. Now we're going to cross to Lindsay Dentlinger, who's in the thick of things. She's joining me from Cape Town. Lindsay, you might not be able to hear me well, so I'm just going to start and ask you where you are, what the latest is.
Sally, I can hear you perfectly fine. I'm just struggling to breathe a little bit. I am on the slopes of what's known as Deer Park in Vredehoek. This is where firefighters behind me, I think they're still behind me, I'm going to move out of shot, are keeping a very close watch. This is really on the last line of residential properties right here. And as you can see, lots of discussions going on there amongst firefighters. I'm told, Sally, that they are literally waiting for the fire to come down the mountain. As crazy as that sounds, it is burning vegetation quite a distance up. They can't tell me exactly how far up, but there's a lot of smoke and of course a lot of wind going with that. And because of this wind, they're not able to get any aerial assistance, so none of the water bombing by helicopter that we saw yesterday. And so they are literally hoping that the wind doesn't change direction, and they are literally standing on guard waiting to meet that fire and will try to ward it off as it comes further down. But of course, Sally, the danger then is it will be burning right in people's backyards, quite literally.
Right, so Lindsay, some real serious concerns at this hour for where the fire is going. You, as you say, on the slopes of Deer Park in Vredehoek, the winds are still high. That's obviously one area of concern. Are you able to tell us about other areas where the fires are either still burning or have just flared up again?
So, Sally, we're not seeing raging big orange licking flames like we saw yesterday, but underneath all the smoke, it is still burning. There are fires, there are hotspots. I've spent most of the afternoon on Philip Gosana Drive, which is that main thoroughfare that leads between the city and the suburbs and towards UCT, where we saw the fires raging significantly yesterday. And firefighters are on that line, moving back and forth constantly, putting out little spots where they might flare up, and because of the wind, you know, they never know when the embers might just pick up and light again. I am told, and we'll probably try to move on from here there later, that Signal Hill, which would be more behind me now on the other side, is where they are keeping a close watch. But we know all those roads that lead up to the cable car, which you might be able to see there behind that smoke just passing past it a little bit lower towards Signal Hill. That's another fire line that firefighters are currently watching quite closely. So those are the two major spots that we know of right now. We understand that the fires also jumped the road on the N3 where we were earlier. But right now, Sally, as we understand it, even though people have evacuated their homes, nobody's home or life is under threat at this hour.
Which is really quite remarkable if you bear in mind what's been going on for the last 24 hours or so. It sounds to me, the way you're describing it, is like it's a giant game of whack-a-mole with fire. All those embers could flare at any time given the right conditions. So I would imagine that authorities are going to be on high alert into the evening. We're certainly going to cross back to you, but just talk to us about the evacuations. We know that the ministerial estate had to be evacuated. We know that the reses had to be evacuated at UCT, certainly on the Rondebosch campus. Are people continuing to evacuate at this time, concerned about that fire, as you say, that may well come over the hill in the Deer Park area where you are?
So walking to the spot, Sally, where we had to leave the car, and coming up, speaking to a resident and some firefighters who are stationed there and keeping guard and prohibiting people other than ourselves from coming here, they were saying that by and large people have not really evacuated their homes. It's those who have really done so by choice, but you'll always get those diehards who are used to this kind of thing in Cape Town and used to living on the slopes of the mountain for years, who will just stay put. And so while the city UCT has recommended that people living in areas like this, Vredehuk, and as you said, those towers we saw being evacuated earlier this morning, which is just behind our cameraman right now, they would suggest that they evacuate because of the smoke. And the same holds true for the UCT students as well. This morning I was at a satellite campus where UCT has their business school, and the students that arrived there this morning primarily were coming there because the smoke inhalation was just getting too bad for them at their residences, and so they are waiting to be placed at hotels in the city. So really evacuation happening sporadically in pockets, a lot being left up to people themselves, whether they feel that there is danger and that they should leave. Really the major pockets where there were fears, those people have left, but still many people still in their homes, basically watching and waiting.
What's the weather expected in the coming hours and certainly over the evening? I can see behind you the wind is certainly blowing. Is it expected to get worse into the evening, or will it die down?
Sally, we don't quite yet know that it will die down completely. The firefighters telling me earlier today at their main station in Ruland Street that they're literally watching it hour by hour. Certainly the wind has tapered off somewhat, but it is still really, really high, as I'm sure you can tell by my hair blowing over my face all the time. So from around 45, 50 kilometers an hour, and earlier today, it's tapering off to about 25, I understand, but it also depends on where you move in the city. You know, certain areas of the city are naturally just more windy than others, but certainly the understanding is from the city authorities as they watch the weather that this wind is going to continue at least for another couple of hours, and we don't quite know yet whether it would have died down completely by morning. Certainly yesterday the winds, despite the fires raging quite significantly, there wasn't anything close to this kind of strength of wind.
Lindsay, tell us a little bit more about what is believed to have started this fire. We know that there's a so-called fire season in Cape Town. Authorities are always primed for when it's very dry and very hot. But equally, an arrest has been made of one man, I understand, for allegedly setting this fire. Also on Cape Talk earlier today, Melanie Verwoerd was saying they saw people literally setting fires. Tell us about this arrest and what it might suggest about how natural this fire season is at all.
Well, Sally, actually, this is actually tapering towards the end of the fire season. Fire season in Cape Town is usually towards the end of the year to the early, summer months of January and February. And by and large, Cape Town has had a pretty quiet fire season, if we can call it that. But what people also don't understand, perhaps, is that a lot of people live on the mountain. A lot of homeless people and others, the mountain is their home, and they regularly start fires here for cooking, to keep warm, and so that's not unusual, and firefighters are very aware that that's what they do. In fact, Melanie was one of those who called me last night just after 8, who lives just on the other side of this area where I'm standing, and residents were reporting that they had seen at least 3 people starting fires, and one of those people was apprehended. But Sally, what we should point out at this case, at this time, that although that person has been arrested, a case of arson has been opened against him, it's yet to be determined at this point whether he did so maliciously, for the very reason, as I say, because people do live on the mountain and they do start fires. And this man, as we understand from the city at least this afternoon, openly admitted to having started a fire. So what I should also point out that happened after nightfall last night, and probably, Sally, is not linked to what started the blaze yesterday. The cause of that blaze and where exactly it started still unknown. We believe it to be somewhere above the Rhodes Memorial, but it could have been somebody else perhaps living on the mountain, and not necessarily to say that the person who was arrested last night is directly linked to what started that blaze yesterday morning.
Well, thank you so much, and such an important point that you make there, Lindsay, and thank you very much for updating us on where the fire is now. The concerns at this stage, where Lindsay is, she's on the slopes of Deer Park, that's over the mountain from Vredehuk, which is where they expect the fire to be moving, and also concerns for Signal Hill. But as Lindsay explained, it's areas of smoulder that could ignite at any time, particularly if that wind that you saw in that crossing really starts to pick up.